Hey everybody, welcome back to Let's Talk. My name is John, and today here on the channel, we're going to be talking about one of my top 5 favorite films of all time, and that is 1974's Chinatown. Celebrating its 50th anniversary, Paramount Presents just gave us a brand new 4K Blu-ray that we're going to review also today. But I like to always start these episodes off with a quick film review, and today is no different. So if you want to know nothing about Chinatown, or you're just here for the 4K Blu-ray review, you can skip ahead to that right now. So Chinatown was released in 1974, is directed by Roman Polanski. This and Rosemary's Baby is what Roman Polanski will always be most famous for. This was actually the last film he made in America, and if you want to find out more about that, you can look it up. I'm not going to really go too deep into Roman Polanski's personal life. You know, it's very dark, so I'm not going to go into that here today. We're here to talk about Chinatown, which was written by Robert Towne. Robert Towne also wrote another one of my favorite films of all time, Days of Thunder, so that's a pretty fun fact for you. The guy who wrote one of the greatest screenplays of all time also wrote the character of Cole Trickle, so that's pretty damn awesome. The score for this movie was done by Jerry Goldsmith. Now, this isn't my favorite Jerry Goldsmith score, that'll always go to Poltergeist, but this is my number 3 behind also Alien, and it is a fantastic score that just matches this film perfectly. This film stars Jack Nicholson in what I think is his greatest role. Jack Nicholson is in every single scene in this movie. So even though Faye Dunaway is the co-star, we're really following around Jake Gittes, or as John Huston's character in this movie likes to call him, Mr. Gitz. John Huston is fantastic in this film as well.
See, Mr. Gitz, most people never have to face the fact. At the right time and the right place, they're capable of anything.
Little fun fact about John Huston in this movie. Jack Nicholson was dating Angelica Houston. This is actually at the beginning of their relationship. So there's a scene in this movie where John Huston's character is talking to Jack Nicholson's character about the possibility of him having sex with his daughter. So in real life, he was having sex with John Huston's daughter, just not the John Huston character in this movie, actually turns out, although they will later in the movie. But what is this movie about? Well, at the very beginning, this movie seems like it's a movie about water, but this is a great Neo Noir film. Actually, I think it's the greatest Neo Noir film of all time, because we start in the beginning of this movie thinking that this movie is just about the fight for water and building a new dam, and at the very beginning, Mrs. Mulwray, or who turns out to not be Mrs. Mulwray, comes in and hires Jake Gittes to spy on her husband, Mr. Mulwray, who is the head of Power and Water. So while he's doing that, it seems like we're just going to catch this guy cheating. That's all this movie seems like it's going to be about. But then what do you know? Faye Dunaway, the real Mrs. Mulwray, comes in and says, you know that girl you hired? That wasn't Mrs. Mulwray. I'm Mrs. Mulwray. And you know what? My lawyer's here to take care of all this. And then we go from there, and what happens later? Well, Mr. Mulwray ends up getting murdered, and now this story just dives into why he was killed and the mystery in that. Now, Jake Gittes can get out of this anytime he wants, but he just has to know what is going on, and then as it keeps going and going, he gets in way too deep until he's finally in over his head. You know, he's got a lieutenant who he used to work with in Chinatown. The movie's called Chinatown, and Chinatown is always lurking in the background of this movie until finally at the very end we get the greatest closing scene in film history, which leads to one of the greatest closing lines in film history.
Forget it, Jake. It's Chinatown.
That line is so famous that when I saw Inside Out, the first Inside Out, it's pretty funny, the second Inside Out is in theaters right now, but the first Inside Out, went and saw that in theaters, and there's a line in that movie when they're in Cloud City, and they'll, you know, they go flying through, and someone gets killed, the cloud gets killed, which is, you know, a little funny joke there, and the two cops go,
and there she is!
Hey, come back here!
Forget it, Jake. It's Cloud.
And I just thought that was absolutely hysterical. I was the only one laughing in the theater, but I just thought that was hysterical. And it's just because of my love for this movie. Everything about this movie, I think, is a 10 out of 10. The cinematography, I just love how beautiful this movie looks. The score matches it perfectly. How they're paying homage to those 1930s, 1940s, 1950s noir films, but we're bringing it to the 1970s. You know, all those homages to that with the opening credits. All of that just works so well. And the screenplay is really what gets you in there. The screenplay is just so well done. This is definitely one of the greatest screenplays of all time. This film didn't win the Academy Award for Best Picture because it lost to a little-known film called The Godfather Part 2. Obviously, if I was voting for the Academy 50 years ago, I would have picked Chinatown personally. But, Godfather Part 2, it's also one of the greatest films of all time. Some will argue it is the greatest film of all time. So if you're going to lose to a film, The Godfather Part 2 is a pretty good film to lose to. But Robert Towne did win Best Screenplay, and it absolutely deserved that. It was nominated for 11 Academy Awards. To this day, it is considered one of the greatest films of all time. Myself included, I consider this to be in the top 5 best films ever made. It's in my top 5 favorite films ever. It even led to a 1990 sequel that was directed by Jack Nicholson, which isn't very good, but you know what? They did go back to that character. I really don't enjoy that movie, though. And you know what? We're also here today to talk about the 4K Blu-ray, which actually includes the Blu-ray of the two Jakes. So let's get into that right now.
More about you.
You may think you know what you're dealing with.
Well, here it is, the brand new Paramount Presents version of Chinatown on 4K Blu-ray. And if you live in the UK, you got a different version of this. And it looks like you got a little bit more of the bells and whistles. You got some cards included in that. So that's pretty cool. What we got here was just the standard Paramount Presents line, which is like their boutique label. They'll give them like limited runs. And if you look at movies like Red Eye and Double Jeopardy, they're actually getting standard 4K Blu-ray releases this year. But as far as the Paramount Presents line goes, they've given us some great releases this year. Like one good one a month. They gave us Primal Fear. They gave us last month another one of my favorite films of all time, Once Upon a Time in the West. And next month they're giving us Election. So they've been nailing these. The only thing is the releases aren't perfect. And that's the same thing with the case of Chinatown. And I'll be upgrading my Chinatown from this previous 2012 scan, but this 2013 Steelbook. And this Steelbook, I'll be holding on to it because I really do appreciate the artwork on it. But this 4K Blu-ray definitely is an improvement overall. Now, it is not the biggest improvement, and the first thing we'll talk about is the audio. The Dolby True HD 5.1. That is the audio that's been following around this Blu-ray for a very long time, and they brought it over to the 4K scan. It's the same thing that Paramount has been doing a lot lately with movies like Primal Fear and Mean Girls. They've just been reusing the same Dolby True HD 5.1, and the quality varies because it's previously released. They're just not upgrading, so however it sounded previously is how it's going to sound now. So if it wasn't that great last time, it's not that great now. So in the case of Primal Fear, thought it was pretty good. Mean Girls, felt like we could have upgraded that. Now, how is it with Chinatown? Chinatown, you know what? It's pretty good. So it's a good Dolby True HD 5.1, very well mixed, makes good use of your rear speakers. I would have liked it to be a little bit higher in that case, but still a pretty good mix. You can set the volume at whatever you want. You don't have to worry about, the dialogue coming in crisp and clear because it does, it does sound like a 1970s film. So sometimes the dialogue in general was just mixed a little bit louder back then. I'm going to guess, mic placement and just what they had available to them. So it still does sound like a 1970s film, a 1970s film paying homage to 1940s noir film. So the Jerry Goldsmith score, all that stuff does come in crisp and clear. It just feels like there was room for us to improve on that. Maybe give us a brand new DTS HD 5.1, or a man can dream about a DTS X track, or a brand new Dolby Atmos track. But this movie probably didn't need that, and the Dolby True HD 5.1 that is included is still pretty good, so I can't knock it too much. It just feels like it's a little bit lazy on Paramount's end, in my opinion. But the packaging itself is really good. Different packaging in the UK, but here we get the Paramount Presents line, so when you open it up like this, you get the original movie poster, and I can really appreciate that. You come underneath, you get the same artwork underneath here, but we get the clear Paramount Presents case, and that way we can have interior artwork, which is pretty cool, from the old Shout and Scream Factory days. I can appreciate that. Missed that when we went to black 4K Blu-ray cases, but Paramount Presents keeps those clear cases, so I can appreciate that. And then, of course, they included the two Jakes just for shits and giggles, because I don't think that movie is good, so that Blu-ray will just sit there forever. And the 4K Blu-ray, that's going to feature everything. That's going to have your 4K Blu-ray scan, that's going to have the audio, and that's also going to have all of your extras. And you get 2 new extras included here, which is actually pretty cool that they included some new extras. I can definitely appreciate that, like I always do. I'm a big extras junkie, and the previously released extras, which were on the Blu-ray, are pretty good. It's a bunch of featurettes that I, if they would have edited together, would have made one good, not great, making of documentary, but I did appreciate that. Then they also had a great commentary track with Robert Towne and David Fincher. That's a lot of fun if you guys are in the commentary tracks. And now they included a couple of new featurettes, one of which is the assistant director telling stories from the set. One of which I absolutely loved was basically telling a story about how Roman Polanski couldn't get Jack Nicholson out of his trailer because he was watching the Laker game on like a small Sony TV. I guess it was almost over, and Roman Polanski was getting really mad, and it got to the point where they stripped down to their underwear and they were fighting. And the assistant director said like an hour later, though, they were partying over at Roman Polanski's house. So Hollywood, right, in the 1970s. So that was a pretty cool story, and I appreciate that they added brand new extras in there. We always don't get that. A lot of times they'll just recycle the previous released extras, which they did, but at least they included some new ones, so I can't knock them too much there. But the thing that we're all asking right now is, how are the visuals? Is it an upgrade over the previously released Blu-ray? Yes, it is. It's definitely a noticeable upgrade too. Not only is the 4K Blu-ray much nicer, but we also get it now in HDR and Dolby Vision. So, of course, now we're going to brighten things up a little bit. Now, the film in general was always a dark film, and they definitely maintain the tone of the previous scan and how the film has always looked. It was always a dark movie, so if they would have brightened this up too much, it definitely wouldn't have worked. But, the thing is, with HDR, we can hit those deep blacks, and we can have more vivid colors. Now, the thing that Paramount loves to do lately is warm their films up, and they did that here again. We saw this pretty damn recently with Once Upon a Time in the West. I do think this is a better scan than Once Upon a Time in the West, but you could definitely see the similarities in the two. We maintained the film grain. It already was kind of, we kind of cleaned it up a little bit on the previous scan. It looks very similar as far as the grain structure from the previous Blu-ray and the brand new 4K Blu-ray. It's just much warmer now, but it is definitely more sharp. It's definitely a sharper looking film than it ever was. The detail is definitely more noticeable now. It was a much softer looking Blu-ray compared to how the scan is now. Right now, it's definitely a much sharper looking film. That's where you're going to definitely notice the 4K Blu-ray doing the most work, is in the details. So you're going to notice the little things like the skin, the hair, all those tiny details. And this movie likes to pay attention to the tiny details. It's a noir film, so we have moments where we'll see Jack Nicholson looking in someone's desk, and we'll have close-ups on that. And now all of that just looks much sharper, and I can really appreciate that. Even though I don't necessarily love that they warmed it up, I think that it actually kind of looked better in that sense on the previous scan. But overall, this is a much better scan, and is definitely the definitive edition of Chinatown is on this 4K Blu-ray. So I could definitely recommend it overall, because we do get some new extras. The audio is pretty solid, even though I would have really loved them to upgrade it. The packaging is pretty good. This is not one of the greatest 4K Blu-rays out there. If you ever want to show somebody what a great catalog title is, you're probably not going to pull Chinatown off the shelf, but the next time you watch Chinatown, you're going to be like, okay, this is definitely a great version of the film. And as one of my favorite films of all time, I'm not disappointed with this release. Of course, I would have liked this to be a 10 out of 10, but I got to be honest with you guys, it's not a 10 out of 10, but it's still a pretty damn solid 8 out of 10, and I can definitely recommend this one, especially if you're a fan of Chinatown. I do not think you'll be disappointed with it. But anyway, guys, what do you think of Chinatown? Let me know in the comments section below. And while you're down there, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, turn notifications on, share this video, get out in those streets and tell your friends about us. We also have channel memberships. We have a Friends of the Channel tier, a Producers tier, where you're going to find John Doe Juggalo, Jason Martin, and Mr. Smelly Potato. We also have a Directors tier, where you're going to find Frank from Frank's Media Reviews. And I suggest you guys check out his YouTube channel and John Doe Juggalo's YouTube channel, especially if you're a fan of physical media, and I promise you guys will not be disappointed. But if you got no money to throw away, don't worry about it at all. All we hope is that you enjoyed this video, and if you did, make sure you guys get out in those streets and tell your friends about us, and then we'll be seeing you around.